are going to listen to your testimony, and I'm going to clean stuff up here.
Good morning. That was unplanned.
I was looking for Kleenex because this is going to be one of those moments. And we can't seem to find it. So if anybody had... All right. Well, it's been about 12 years since I last shared my testimony. And so they're challenging to me just because of, just bringing myself back there to the times before, to where I am today. It's not where I am today, but it's those days before that are very challenging. So bear with me as I give you my testimony. God is glorified through all of this. It's not, so I'll put this in my face here shortly. All right. Good morning. My name is Heath Taberge. It's an honor to glorify God this morning with this opportunity to share my testimony with you all. Even though I'm not one to boast about my past, I believe and hope what I share will encourage someone today. Okay, where does one start? How far back should I go? This was my thought process. I was trying to put something together to give you all a glimpse into the road to which I've traveled and still travel today. I was hoping not to get too deep into the weeds, but it's hard not to when you have a story to tell. Disclaimer, I've decided to make this a PG-rated testimony. I was born in 1972 in a small nickel plant community of Port Colborne, which is off the shores of Lake Erie, Ontario. But I was raised in a small cottage town called Crystal Beach, which also sits on the shores of Lake Erie. I lived in this town until the age of 22, when I made the decision to move to Edmonton, Alberta in 1994. But before my relocation, here's a bit of background to where I had come from to where I am today. At a young age of 4, my mother abandoned my sister and I. And dumped us off with my father. Unfortunately, my father's life choices, he was to be incarcerated into the Kingston Penitentiary shortly after receiving us. Because of my father's unfortunate situation, my father's sister, husband, and their 4 children were willing to take my sister and I into their home because of our circumstances. This would have been the last time my sister and I would have seen my father. Not long after he was incarcerated, he had taken his life. My father's sister, my aunt, was a very loving, soft-hearted French woman who wanted nothing but good things for us. My cousins were also very loving and accepted my sister and I very openly. My uncle, though, he was a hard man, an old farm boy who was raised in the old country of Quebec and very set in his ways. I was baptized at the age of 6 into the Catholic Church, attended a Catholic school from kindergarten to grade 8, and then attended a public high school. I was an altar boy in the church for about 3 years, serving Sunday service, weddings, as well as funerals. I knew there was a God. I had seen Jesus on the cross every Sunday and heard about the Holy Spirit, but I was never raised to understand that there was a relationship to be had with all of them. I didn't know Jesus was God in the flesh until 15 years ago. Our new family attended Catholic church every Sunday. We attended special services week over week. But to truly say that we were followers of Christ and followed his ways would be an unfair statement. See, the home we were being raised in had an outward appearance of believers to the community, but within the home was quite the opposite. My uncle was very controlling and was not a wholesome man. There was physical abuse at all levels, as well as mental abuse. I witnessed many sinful acts, as well felt the physical abuse. it was, let's say, an unhealthy home, and sin was ruling over it. When I was 12, my sister ran away due to the abuse she received at the hands of my uncle and possibly other family members. There was a lot of abuse in this home, but as I said, I was going to keep this testimony PG rated. At that, I found out at that time, I found out at that moment my sister left. In that moment, I felt abandonment all over again. First it was my mom, then my father, now my sister. I was all alone without an identity. This was very hard for me. All my cousins were either married or in university, but basically on their way to an independence outside the home. So I was the only one left out of all the kids in this home. As I said, I knew God, but I had not reached a point in my life. I had reached a point in my life I thought he didn't care about me, and I was on my own. It's all up to me now. But there were many moments God showed himself to me, but I didn't recognize his voice or see what he wanted to show me. The next 3 years from that point on were pretty much a downward slide for me. At the age of 13, I was getting into alcohol. I was lying, stealing, eventually getting into trouble with the law. At the age of 14, I was sent to a group home for a summer because I decided to drink alcohol to the point of intoxication. I sold my friend's father's car, then we got into a wreck after smashing through a power pole. I was blessed. I wasn't injured, nor was my friend who was the sole passenger. To this day, I believe God's hands of protection was again covering me, but I didn't see it that way. To me, I was just lucky. So as you can hear, I wasn't in a good place. I wasn't attending Sunday service anymore. God was not in my plan, so I thought. I was spiraling out of control, influenced by sin, which became a dark cloud following me wherever I went, which in some strange way was comforting. By the age of 15, I ran away from home, never returned or looked back. I wanted independence, and I was tired of being controlled. I was couch surfing for about a year until I was able to get my feet back on the ground through social services. I continued to attend school, and through that time, I was also playing in a band, which I did weekend gigs in bars and other events to financially support my lifestyle. Eventually, my life dependencies escalated from alcohol to marijuana, and then to a higher level of drug options. I dropped out of high school just shy of 3 credits in order to graduate. I was entrenched in sin, and I continued on this path until the age of 22. At that point, I had enough of the life I was living. I knew if I didn't make a change, I was going down the same path that my father most likely had taken. I just didn't want that. Skipping now to 1994, I bought a blue backpack from a local home hardware, which I still have today as a reminder. Just $250 in my pocket after buying a one-way standby airplane ticket to Alberta. I wanted change for a better life. I wanted to make something of myself. I had no intention of letting anything hold me back. So I left Ontario to move to Alberta. Life was so much better in Alberta. It appeared my dark cloud was lifted. I was able to land a job the first week, met a girl shortly after, gained a network of friends. Life was looking good. So I thought to myself, I made a great decision making this move, and it's all up from here. So I thought, I become more comfortable within this new lifestyle. I had a blossoming relationship, but I digressed back into recreational alcohol and drugs. I thought since I was working and had a much different life from the life I had, I thought nothing of it, considered it normal, and was pretty much okay with it. At the age of 26, I married the same girl I had met not too long after being in Alberta. I gained a stepson through this relationship into marriage, and in 1999, we had a baby girl within the first year of our marriage. My first family are Anglican, so I would attend the Anglican church for Christmas, Easter, basically those special events that would be an excuse to attend church. But I still had no desire to attend church, nor wanted to give God control of my life. In 2003, my wife had died. Two weeks after her 30th birthday. And I found myself once again alone, but now raising 2 children, a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old. I felt alone. I despised God for what had happened. How can a loving God allow this to happen to me? My life was so much better. Things were starting to come together. I was married, a family man, loved my children, I was a faithful husband, new foundations were being made. Why was he doing this to me? Had I not endured enough in my earlier years of life to which things like this shouldn't be happening? I struggled to make sense of it all, which led me to more bad choices in my life as well my kids' life. The dark cloud was back with a vengeance. I'd become a functioning alcoholic, a drug user, not caring about anything but myself, and numbing the realities of everyday life. But in 2005, I met a new girl.
Hi. Well, while Heath was growing up in Ontario, I was growing up here in Alberta on an acreage just outside of St. Paul in the Lakeland. There were 4 of us kids, but I was the youngest with a 6-year age gap between me and my next sibling, my sister. Truthfully, though, I felt like most of my childhood, I was an only child. My dad, from a very young age, had an awareness of God. Shortly around the time I was born, he had asked God what he should do to support the family. They'd bought some land and had dreams of raising us kids on the acreage. The answer was to go into business for himself as a carpenter. Now you have to understand, he could build things, but he was by no means a carpenter. He built a woodworking shop in the yard with the idea of being present for all of us kids as we grew up. He will testify to this day that God gave him on-the-job training at every turn. More times than not, Dad would come to do some job he had never done, and he would suddenly get an idea of how to go about doing it, how to achieve it. I spent a lot of time with my dad in that shop. He had no problem taking the time to get me set up with paint, sandpaper, or to cut something on the table saw, even when he was busy with his work. Around the age of 4, my parents decided to join the Worldwide Church of God. At that time, it was led by Herbert W. Armstrong. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but there's that. We no longer celebrated holidays like Easter, Christmas, or any of the others, and even birthdays were pretty subdued. Attending a Catholic school, I would go sit in the library during religion class. And anything we had to do in class, like when Christmas rolled around, Easter, Halloween, like any kind of holiday, that was fun. I was given something alternate to do. So like Christmas time, I was given a picture of just a tree and I had to color it green. And that was it. That was my fun for Christmas. And, you know, it was not really fun either having to explain to the other kids why I wasn't in religion class, or, well, how come you're not doing this? How come you're not in the Christmas concert and whatnot? We observe the Old Testament days and feasts. So instead of celebrating Christmas stuff and bringing in my Halloween candy and whatever else, I would go to school with flatbreads because it was days of unleavened bread. In the fall, I would have to get homework for the time I would be away because we celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles. So there was that. So I had to explain that every single year. We honored the food laws strictly. If we weren't sure if something was pork, we stayed away from it. I remember my oldest sister ate cold cuts once and later realized it was pork, and she actually thought she was going to go to hell because of it. So relationships with extended family were affected greatly. We weren't exactly ostracized, but we were definitely setting ourselves apart. So I don't really have relationships with cousins or whatnot because I think we were always like the weird branch of the family. Into our teen years, my brothers, sisters, and I all came to the fork in the road with God. Being the youngest, I saw a lot play out with the decisions they chose, the heartbreak and disappointment my parents experienced, and yet I followed the same path. When I turned 18, I informed my parents that I just didn't feel it. If I picked up the phone and called God, it seemed like he was never at the other end. I didn't feel any relationship taking place as I was supposed to have with God. I didn't want to continue living life that others seemed to be living, and they looked fine. I moved to Edmonton following one of the too many Mr. Wrongs. Looking back, I can't really say what it was I was chasing. At the time, I didn't stand for anything, and you know the cliche, you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And I did. It's very true. A couple years of freedom in the big city went by. I was struggling on all levels. I couldn't understand how I wasn't finding my Prince Charming, my knight in shining armor. My dad had set the bar so high, I guess. I had never seen my dad drunk. I'd never heard him swear. He outwardly showered my mom with love and respect. He was always lovingly present in my life. He provided for his family, took care of his mother in her old age, and did much the same for my mom's mom. My goal was a marriage like that and a husband resembling my dad. Why couldn't I find that? Surely all the time I spent at the bars looking should have amounted to something more than what I found. I did find someone, and it was in a bar. Now, I'm not limiting God by saying that any relationship, no matter where it starts, isn't redeemable. For me, it wasn't the case. Basically, I didn't realize that I was aspiring to a life with God in it. The result of it, only not admitting that he actually needed to be in it. I was in a marriage, because I ended up getting married at 22. I was in a marriage that was on the whole the complete opposite of what I'd witnessed my parents having. The realization came shortly after the birth of my son. It was jarring. I had messed up. Not only was I affected, but now I had messed up my son's life. How was it going to be fixed? There was no way forward. I was always wrong. I was immature. I was unreasonable. My thoughts about marriage and life were old-fashioned. And there had been a comment made to me, even if we married the wrong person, it was too late now, I was told. The marriage did not go on much further. The parting ways wasn't amicable. I was the one to blame, and there was a cost to that. So anyway, let's skip forward a couple of tense years of me trying to figure things out. I was working for a company that had been bought out. My job was no longer mine, as they were bringing their own people in. I got word of a possible job with a company called Computalog. It's in the oil and gas industry, ended up being changed into precision drilling later on. So I went to this interview. The position was payroll. I knew nothing about payroll. Like, I didn't even finish high school. So I had no experience, of course. But I got offered the job immediately after the interview, because apparently I had interviewed very well, and my lack of knowledge wasn't an issue. So keep in mind, I'm essentially a single mom, still going through a divorce though, where I'm not being given anything without a fight. Time with my son is being threatened anytime I don't do what I'm expected. This job opportunity comes up, lands in my lap, but they say it might require and probably will require overtime. My son's dad would gladly take more time with our son. He'd probably be willing to change how many days he'd get compared to what I would, since I had to work overtime. That was always like a thing. I sought advice from my dad. I expressed how afraid I was if I took the job. Somehow it would be used against me. I was afraid to risk it. That was my reality at the time. Dad said that I needed to trust in what I knew was important, and I decided out of that. I turned the job down. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Computalog, same company. The receptionist had just given her 2 weeks' notice. I was a receptionist. They wanted me, no interview necessary, because the woman I had interviewed with for the payroll job had vouched for me. So why is this such a big deal, you might wonder? Probably another job would have come along. to be a computer log. Turns out he was already working there. Yeah, still. A year and a half later, he had asked me to attend the wedding of a mutual work colleague. From that point on, our story grew together. Fast forward not quite a year, we got married and officially became a blended family. Wish we could say that our story was one of tied up loose ends and we lived happily ever after, but that wasn't quite how it turned out. Turns out we were facing a mountain of challenges. I didn't know how to easily step in and become mother and wife when the woman who filled the spot before me had died. Then there was a stepson who was full of anger and hurt, well aware that he didn't belong biologically to either of us. I was also trying hard to have my son, who is only part-time with us, not feel like less of our blended family, or that he was less loved by me than before. A fun fact, though, my son and Heath's daughter are 3 months apart exactly, to the day. But that was also a challenge because they were so close in age, yet had faced such different circumstances in their earlier part of life. Keith's dependency and ghosts from the past topped off that list. I was white-knuckling life at times, yet I was reluctant to see that God was the answer even then. My family would keep, well, maybe this, maybe you guys need to go to church, you need to do this. I didn't want any part of that at that time. I wasn't ready to admit I was wrong. Lifetimes went by in the span of a few years. We managed, but it was far from what I had imagined. It was most times a heap of mess. About 5 or 6 years into our marriage, we had my dad over to help with some renos that we were doing. As he and I were refinishing some cabinets, we were out in the garage one day. Heath was at work, and Dad started saying how he was just really concerned for Heath and for me and the kids, and he could tell that things weren't great. Heath kind of still kept his distance when we would get together as a family. Dad picked up on things that I didn't think maybe even we were aware of, maybe. He wanted to reach out to Heath and said he was thinking of writing him a letter. I was genuinely afraid it would have the total opposite effect. I tried to convince him that it, probably wouldn't do much, and we've talked, but Dad was pretty persistent, and he left. Eventually, at the end of the day, he went home, and I was just on pins and needles, wondering, what's going to happen if he writes this letter? What is his reaction going to be? Is it going to be to just run or not want anything to do with my family, or, that's what I was most concerned about, to be honest. So, yeah, we just kind of waited a few days to see if this letter was coming, and finally I worked up the courage. I thought, I have to say something, I have to mitigate it so it's not such a surprise. So, a little bit of a backstory, though, before I continue on that vein. He found it extremely difficult to be around any type of conversation to do with God, church, anything, religion. He would, when we would be with friends, he would leave the room, he would go outside, he would come back in and say, well, are you guys still talking about that? And then he would go back out again if we were. So that's the premise, and keep in mind, my dad's has always been a godly man, pursuing faith and pursuing to know God. And that is the way that he would come about his concern. it was a Thursday evening. Just before supper, I went out to the garage. That's his favorite place to hang out after work and until bed at that time. I brought up the conversation of the previous week with Dad when he was visiting, and I did my best to, gently express Dad's concern for us and for him, but hoping it wouldn't cause tension between us, especially when I brought up the fact that this letter might actually be on the way. I held my breath and I waited.
But before we share that response, I still need to give more details to my story. You see, within our marriage, I gained an extended family who loved God, to which I admired. But it took some time to realize and come to terms with how much I wanted what they had. I wanted God in my life, needed Jesus. Constance's dad is a God-fearing man who loves the Lord. He exudes a calm, a sense of peace about himself, and I desire to have this as well. I wanted to share this within my family. So one evening in my safe place, my garage, I submitted myself to God. I was at that point in my life, I no longer wanted to be chained to alcohol. Ignoring my family, I wanted his help. I wanted to lean on him, to give him control of my life. I opened my arms and verbally cried out to him, asking for his help to relieve me of my sinful ways and to let me see life through a different lens. But this was something I did not share with Constance at the time. I thought I would work this through with God first. Now, to my response to Constance was, I've been thinking we need God in our lives. I think we need to start going back to church.
So I couldn't believe my ears. The before and after of his reply. In movies where you see something happen, I don't know, maybe it's sometimes they lock eye, the woman walks in, the guy's like, oh, and everything changes, right? Where all of a sudden everything's like colorful and there's music and things are in focus. Honestly, that is exactly how I felt. It was just like the cogs of a big wheel had slipped into place for the very first time. But yet nothing had really even happened. We didn't do really anything. We were still in the garage and, but it was different. Life was somehow new then, at that moment, for me. So we went into the house. Remember, Thursday, just before supper, we go in the house and we tell the kids, we're going to church this Sunday. We had finally come to a place of surrender. In 2011, I was baptized, admitting in public what I had resisted to admit to myself in private for so long. God is real. He loves me. He sent his son for my sins to have a relationship with me, to make that possible. Life with God is a life I'd actually been searching for. God, in the midst of our marriage, has brought us together in a way I couldn't have ever imagined. He has blessed us with music, the gift of being able to not only worship him, but also to have found a bond with the two of us. And it's held us together and just made a dramatic difference for us. And it's one of the reasons why, too, that we love it so much. The relationship with my son's dad has also experienced healing, allowing for harmony that I wouldn't have anticipated before.
2 years after Constance was baptized, I gave my life to Christ on February 13th, 2013. This is the best thing I did. Life still wasn't easy. I still struggled with letting go of wanting to be in control, but things got better the more I put less focus on me and more on Jesus. I can also testify that not long after my baptism, God released me of my dependencies. The dark cloud faded. I began to feel God's presence in my everyday, even in my weak moments. He was there to pick me up and push me forward. The one thing I can honestly say I've learned on this walk with Jesus is no matter how weak I feel, our God is a strong God. And He's always faithful when I have moments of faithlessness. We all have a purpose. Nothing happens by chance. We're not lucky. It's not karma. It's God's plan. His perfect plan. His perfect timing. I want to end, well, before I end, there's something I needed to include here, which I just didn't have the time. I renewed my relationship with my mom 20 years ago. Best thing ever. I forgave her. I had to. And so we have a relationship. It's a different relationship. She lives in Ontario. I live here. But that was a reconciliation that I needed to make in my life. I had to reach out to her. I had to just forgive her. In my baptism, I forgave my abusers. I had to. Gotta move on. The wounds are deep. I think they'll always be pretty deep. But I don't look back, I look forward. I'm encouraged to do so. So I want to end with this scripture. It's such a telling scripture for us, for me especially. Proverbs 3, 5, 6. It's very common. Everybody knows it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your path. So I thank you for letting us give our testimonies this morning.
There's just one scripture I'd like to share. It's 1 Corinthians 1:26. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to being things that are, so that no human might boast in the presence of God. And because of Him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption, so that, as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord, and I will try to do so all the days of my life for what He's done.
So one last thing too, which is very funny. When Pastor Shannon asked us to do this, I probably turned white because I don't like to do these kinds of things. And the last thing I like to do is talk about myself. But it's funny. He's like, "Yeah, no, just 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. It's okay. It's okay." I was like, 10 minutes is a long time. Well, as I can see the time now, we've gone well past 10 minutes. And I do appreciate your patience with us. But God, He's amazing when we feel that stress and that intolerance of wanting to move forward. Just do it. Just do it. It's just amazing because just getting this testimony out again, I'm healing even more. I think we both are. So again, thank you. Till you, Doug.
I think I can say on behalf of the congregation, we're glad you're here. So